Hi. This is a podcast with David Carpenter. David is a writer on psychedelics. He contributes to Forbes magazine and Lucid News. He's also an author of a book called Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics, Mdma, and he's another one coming out in the summer, which is putting a bit of pressure on him, around the same theme, and the topic in that is 5-MeO. And I came across David maybe a year and a half ago when he was good enough to do a review of the documentary that we did, 5-MeO. And so we chat everything psychedelics, from how he got interested in them, the growth of the industry, where it's going, the kind of miraculous results that are seen out there, and a little bit of his personal history in the area, and anything and everything else. At the end of the podcast, David offered to give a free copy of his first book, Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics, Mdma. So I will put the email address on his website, and you can get in contact and just say, reference the podcast, and he'll send you out a free copy of the book. I've read the book, and it's a great book, and it's an amazing, we talk about it for a little while in the movie, but I suppose in a way that I grew up with the idea that most psychedelics were horrendously dangerous, and the world has changed so much that it is now $1 billion industry, and MDMA in particular, it looks like it's will probably be available for therapeutic use, given all the results that has been seen over the last few years for the treatment of PTSD. So it's kind of, I love when there's utterly alternative views of things, and it's no longer just a viewpoint. The data is in, and the big money people are back in this industry. So it is no longer just an idea. It's heading in a very particular way. So we talk about all that, and but I wanted to introduce here just to say that his book, you can get a free copy if you go onto his website, Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics, and I'll put the email address that you can use to contact him as well. All right, enjoy. Bye-bye. How are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Frank?
Very good. Is it a year or two? It's not. It's a year anyway.
It's at least a year. Yeah, I think it's going on like a year and a half. We've been trying to plan this. It feels like it anyway.
So when did I chat to you? So it was a year and a half ago.
So I wrote the story about your film, 5-MeO. I think it was March 2021, I believe, or 2020 it must have been. Because it was just a couple months after yours had come out.
Okay, so March 2020 is before the world, let's just say, went a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
Even more crazy. But that would have been then, if that was coming out, that would have been March 2020 was, because that was back when, because I was sick then. I got COVID back in March 2020. Like I got the first dose of it.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah,
that might have impacted things. Yeah.
I just went and looked at it. It's actually March 2021.
Okay.
It's not 2020, so it is about a year.
It's a year. Okay, that would make more sense. Yeah, because I was trying to do the. Yeah. All right. Well, so it's a year and a bit. The world is still crazy. The world is just nuts anyway. It's not, it wasn't like less crazy, the last while.
No, and it's like a time warp through this whole thing. I swear I can't figure if I've seen someone 6 months ago or 3 years ago. So everything's jacked up.
You kind of, you really don't realize what you've got used to and what you've not got used to. Like, I think my wife was talking about, we were going out for dinner, and it was kind of something that we just totally took for granted. And it became way less of a, things have totally opened up here now.
Oh, good.
And as of Monday, then everything, it's over as far as I know, which is just wonderful.
Yeah.
So life, but yeah, I mean, it's very much a world like this, like, you know, the screens, talking to people, there's so much of that in the last year and a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And it's not really a surrogate for
No.
communication. It's kind of a sad one. I mean, it's nice that we can connect like this, and
Yeah.
this has become something that people are more comfortable with. But yeah, there's nothing like sitting with someone, having a beer and conversation. That's
Well, the energy is totally different. Actually, that reminds me of when you had written the story. I remember you sent me a picture because I was giving you, I think I gave you an edit of some link or something like that, and you sent me a picture of some lovely craft beer
oh
bar of
yeah.
a Sunday afternoon
Yeah.
over there, and I went, oh, I would love that now. That's just right up my street.
Oh, it was so good. We were in the Pacific Northwest too, where my family lives. So just like idyllic, beautiful glaciers and orcas out in the water and having
Oh,
just this beautiful IPA. Yeah, it was wonderful. It's we were actually out and about. They were letting us go out, and I think we even had masks down. So it felt like things were lifting then. It was, but a year later,
yeah.
here we are. Yeah. So
And well, I mean, it's almost, it's interesting. It's almost, it's not quite politics and religion, but it is as well. If there's different views, let's just say, and there's a family dinner, I think, politics, let's leave that off the table. Let's leave
yeah,
religion off the table. And do you know what? Let's leave COVID off the table. I
completely
think,
off the table. Yeah, that's
yeah.
been the third or the fourth one to add to that. Yeah, what a mess, but it feels good here I'm in the Bay Area now. I've been traveling up to Seattle quite a bit, and now I'm back here in the Bay, and we've opened up too. So
Okay.
it'll be nice to get out and see people for
Yeah,
sure.
it's just the relaxation of it. It's yeah. Um, let's just hope that's the end of it. I mean, I don't, if it seems to be new. The let's say the main. Sometimes I was talking to somebody about this. Like, it's like as if if you say you're plugged into the media and the TV stations and all that, there's a singular kind of, let's say, storyline. We're getting a little bit, but it's a storyline, and the storyline for the last 2 years has been COVID. Now, all of a sudden, if you're plugged into that storyline, now it seems to be it's Russia, and I'm kind of going, right. Well, sure, look, let them off to play war. I don't really care about that. It's not on my doorstep. I mean,
Yeah,
I may well, but I kind of just I'm going to unplug. Well, let's see what happens. But you know what I mean? It's just
I
that
do.
feeling.
Yeah, yeah, I'm ready to unplug. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I've been keyed into the Russia situation. Jennifer, my fiance, and I have some friends that are from Ukraine.
Okay.
So yeah, I've been kind of watching that pretty closely. So yeah, it's all went from kind of COVID to bam over to that. It's just funny how quickly.
Yeah, and like if say you just decide, you know what, I'm not going looking at somehow if you're not looking at the news and you're not looking at social media, well then there's nothing happening really. You're just
Yeah,
moving, you're just putting out the trash and picking up the dog shit,
yeah, yeah,
and there's nothing much. But the main story, and like you'll have your own relationship storylines and family storylines and job, all these, but the primary one. And so, yeah, it's just odd. Yeah, I guess Russia. So, what are your friends saying in Ukraine? What are they?
it's a mixed bag. One of them that lives in Kiev is saying not much is happening. We're not really all that afraid of a Russian invasion. The people that are living closer towards the Donbass and that whole region in the east
Yeah.
are afraid and feeling. And
Okay.
I guess that sort of makes sense because that's where the activity is going. But it's all kind of just like COVID, just a whole lot of misinformation, weird information floating around, nothing to grab onto. There's nothing like they've attacked, they're coming in. It's all this
Yeah.
soft, I think it's
Well,
called soft battle.
it's kind of interesting to describe something as a peacekeeping force, isn't it?
Hmm.
Like, oh, we're
Hmm.
going to go in to keep the peace. All right.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, if somebody else used that when they were going into Poland a few years back, and
right.
they were in to protect people and keep people safe. So anyway, it's another, that's a rabbit hole. Yeah, I mean, anyway, we'll come out of that for the moment. Thanks a million for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm real stoked we can talk.
Yeah, it was when you see, our movie really didn't get much publicity. I mean, but then we got, I like to say, oh well, we were in Forbes magazine, you know,
yeah,
because it sounds great, and it's pretty amazing that a magazine like that would go with mostly, let's say, stories about alternative movies are confined to the good grace of a blogger somewhere, not a mainstream, significantly mainstream platform like Forbes magazine to talk about our movie. It was kind of mind-blowing at the time. So how does it happen that you, well, there's loads of questions there, but let's take Forbes. How does it happen that Forbes and you got together and that they're good with writing stories about psychedelics?
Yeah, that's a question that people ask me, and before I came to write for Forbes, I thought the same thing. It would be impossible to write about this because it's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's, it's not like right-leaning or anything like that, but it's a very serious kind of venerable, it's been around for, I think at least 80 years, if not like 100, investor focused, very serious, people's money, they take that seriously. So I think it was in 2018, I had been writing about cannabis for about 4 or 5 years for a magazine called Cannabis Now. And I had an opportunity to talk with an editor at Forbes. And I said, hey, do you need anyone to write serious stories about cannabis? I wasn't doing kind of high times leaning stuff. I really wanted to know what was going on with all the states going legal in the US, with Canada about to go legal. And they said, sure, we love the writing that you've done for Cannabis Now. We'd love to have you on our contributors list. So I did that for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And I, in San Francisco, saw the premiere of the film Fantastic Fungi. And it was getting a bunch of press prior to coming out. And it looked really beautiful. And a friend of mine had bought some tickets. And I went to go see that, and I was blown away by it and had known about the Hopkins research with psilocybin and treating depression and end-of-life fear. But when I saw that film, particularly Paul Stamets' story, have you seen the film?
I have, yeah. Paul Stamets. I met Paul Stamets.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I did, yeah. Very briefly now, but it was one of these hello.
Selfie.
You really let yourself down when you go, can I take a selfie? But I did.
Oh, you got to. You absolutely
I think you have to. Somebody you admire, you just goes, you know what?
You've got to, yeah. So, Paul Stamets' story, I think it's pretty widely told. Seen it on YouTube quite a bit, where he tells the story of overcoming his stutter.
Yeah.
He had stuttered for many years through a psilocybin trip. And I mean, it just kind of like rocked me to the core to hear that on top of, the Hopkins work and of course, Imperial College London and just all these research facilities or universities that have been coming out with all this information on psychedelics. And I was talking to my fiance Jennifer that it'd be nice to write about this, but it's far removed from cannabis, and she was actually said I should pitch Forbes the idea of writing about fantastic fungi, and I said there's no way they would accept that cannabis and psychedelics are not the same thing, even though people might put them into the same kind of stoner category. And the next day I thought about it and I was like, I'm just going to ask my editor at Forbes if I can expand my lane into sort of all psychoactive drugs.
Yeah.
And I did. And the guy got back to me immediately. And he's one of the top editors there for the contributors in kind of my area of Forbes, which is strictly online, the writing that I do.
Yeah.
And he said, yes, go for it. Just stick to, I can't remember how he phrased it exactly, but it was something like, follow the laws, but bend them where you can, so
Yeah. Okay.
it's something like that. Of course, it all has to be legal, what I'm talking about. But there are ways to kind of walk around this and still offer people valuable information, safety tips, countries where they can go where substances aren't controlled substances that are in the United States. So yeah, it started with that, and I guess that was now 2-3 years ago. And it started with that fantastic fungi review.
Can I ask you then, just the way you described your kind of excitement and your being blown away by the movie, but what was your, was it the fact that there was a movie made, or was it the content about psychedelics that you just hadn't thought about psychedelics like that?
Yeah, I had thought about psychedelics like that, but I think it was the fact that I was sitting in this theater. It is San Francisco, so it's very, open-minded, but something like 1,000 people watching this film that felt very mainstream to me. Mm-hmm. And that the conversation, How to Change Your Mind, Michael Pollan's book had come about. There was that 60 Minutes segment that was talking about the Hopkins research had happened, I believe, already. But it was just the fact that it was becoming so big and mainstream. That was what got me. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, even for Forbes, you would have thought the fact that it is already billions have gone into it. So it is, there was talk that it would be for them, the new cannabis in terms of an industry. I don't think that's quite happened, but it seems like the road has continued.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that has happened. It is kind of the new cannabis in a way. It isn't happening in the sense that, take for instance in the US where I'm at, where states are becoming legal, except for Oregon. That was a huge happening. Our state of Oregon legalized psilocybin, which I could have never seen happening, 5-10 years ago. But psychedelics have sort of, I think that they've gone beyond what cannabis, or they soon will go beyond what cannabis can, because we still are federally illegal for cannabis. It's just a state by state kind of situation here where it's legal. But psychedelics are being respected in a way that federal research dollars are now going into it in the US. And not a ton, but enough. And it's being studied at universities, which that didn't happen with cannabis. When cannabis was ramping up and becoming legal, you didn't see it available for study in places like Hopkins or Madison, Wisconsin. It's a big university in the state of Wisconsin. You didn't see it at UCSF here in San Francisco. Cannabis was still just forbidden, and psychedelics aren't. They're getting into those research facilities like they did in the 50s before everything went sideways in the 70s.
Yeah, I think the industry is definitely far less about, like, if you would say that predominantly cannabis is about the kind of personal usage of it. The psychedelic industry is all about the therapeutic use. That's what it seems to be. So one is recreational and the other one is therapeutical.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Recreational versus therapeutic. And the therapeutic I think that sets off alarm bells for people when they hear therapeutic, that the very next thing they hear is big pharma and, the government taking over, corporadelic, kind of situation with big business sort of stealing what psychonauts have worked on for 80 years or whatever. But when I hear therapeutic, I think of it in the sense of like in Oregon, where they're taking their time putting together their psilocybin regulations. So I don't know if you saw recently with the new, I don't know that they have actually enacted this and put it into law there in Oregon, but they want to have it so that it's natural mushrooms that are used, natural psilocybin that is legal for use and not synthetic.
Okay, wow.
Which will be, that's a big deal, because obviously Compass Pathways, who have created synthetic psilocybin, they have a stake in being one of the first, not, probably the first to supply a place like Oregon that's going to be the testing market, I guess you could say, for like the whole United States, but even like the rest of the world. So they're doing it in this way that thinks about the person who's growing mushrooms, about the heritage of mushrooms. So it feels to me less kind of big pharma takeover, which is nice,
Yeah, well, that's interesting. It's come around like that, really, because you would have thought that the big business would drive it, but then you can't imagine if if a board of directors try their product, you you would have thought that will kind of, let's just say, maybe this is not true for everybody, but might break apart any kind of rigid views of how things should definitely be if they take a decent enough dollop of their products.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, they might let go of all those. They might just go, okay. But then it needs to make it, in a way, it does. I have so many different views in it, but I think, for those who are psychonauts and want to take it, I think people should be able to take it under the right environments, etc. But I think for the people that it could actually do something for, having it in a controlled environment, having the structures of, let's say, a process and a way to do it, and a beautiful environment, it's and bringing it into the modern world. Hundreds of years ago, it would have been done with shamans, and it was done in a correct way, and trying to bring that into the modern world. I do think there's something really powerful in that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people email me all the time and ask to be connected with facilitators. It's funny, it's not like drug seeking either. It's not people saying, can you hook me up? Which I would have thought I'd get more of that. It's serious people who are, suffering, or know someone who's suffering PTSD, anxiety, whatever, particularly through the pandemic. And they're asking me for tips on how to basically have a successful trip. They're asking me. I'm just a writer. I mean, I hold no degrees. I have a 4-year degree from a university in English literature, but I'm not the guy that they should be asking of information on this stuff. But I do have a lot of information at my fingertips, so I'm able to give some advice and point them towards research that's going on and best practices. There are lots of really well-respected groups that are kind of in the underground that show people just the basics of, maybe set an intention, maybe don't play music that has any kind of a personal connection to it, because that could draw you down a certain road. Like there are just these things that people have no idea about, but in the structure like that you described, where you do it in a therapeutic way with perhaps a psychotherapist, they will know all of those small things that become really big things when you trip. Playing the song at the wrong time that reminds you of your lover, when you're 28 that did you wrong, like that could absolutely.
There's just so much to talk about there. I mean, a tiny speck of dust could send you down any kind of an alleyway, and that's the unimaginable. But there is something, like when I heard about them, I had heard about them when I was younger, obviously, like most of us had, and there was obviously a view of them, and I was very naive, really, and I just went, I'm staying a million miles away from all that. And when I kind of started to hear about them, maybe whenever it was 5-6 years ago, so 46, it would have been when I was 40. It's quite exciting to hear it in a different way, to hear about the mind expansive, the therapeutics, or even things like people giving up cigarettes or whatever it may have been. There was a sprouting of an industry that I know, if it came to someone like me, that means there was a lot of, and which I subsequently found out about, there was a huge amount of work prior to that. But of all the new industries, to me, it seemed really like I was grabbed by the fact that this thing that I was terrified, something like acid or MDMA or mushrooms, that suddenly they were becoming, words like therapeutics were being used. That's, you talked about, you know, when you were in the cinema, that blew my brains at the time. I just wanted to hear more and more and more, because it was just so different than anything
Yeah.
I'd ever heard about, you know?
Yeah, same with me. Something that was pivotal besides Fantastic Fungi prior to that was all of the news around MDMA chewing your brain up, you know, and making Swiss cheese of young minds, you know,
Yeah.
their brains, literally their brains, like it was doing something terrible, you know, just robbing the brain of serotonin and dopamine. And of course, that can happen with like really excessive use. A lot of times it's adulterants that are put into so-called MDMA. But that was the message, right? That was really all you heard about MDMA. And then I had a pure MDMA experience, you know, with the pure molecule, like
Yeah.
someone had provided me. And it was probably to date one of the top 10 experiences of my life, that I, even telling it right now, I get a little bit of goosebumps of the feeling I had. And that's a chemical feeling that my brain just did, reminded me of an expansion that I had, and, you know, neurogenesis, all that neuroplasticity. That blew my mind, that I was hearing all this information about it that was negative, and I was hearing very little of the positive. And as a writer, that's like, okay, that's a perfect ground to go find some information and plant some seeds to open up information about this to kind of the masses. And when I have a platform like Forbes, and I'm given a long leash to talk about this stuff, that's a really powerful position to be in. Not in the sense that I have power, but to be able to open up the conversation. You know,
Yeah.
it
Well,
feels,
it's exciting. Like, you
it's
know, it's an
exciting.
exciting area in loads of different ways, for the good, the bad. It's such a huge, like, take MDMA. I know you have a book on that, so we'll talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that. But if you take that one, so maybe in my 30s, I had some ecstasy at a festival, and I'm always conscious of my kids downstairs when I start
Yeah.
talking about this.
I always wonder about that.
I was going, am I loud now? Can you hear me? Because he's down below. So
You have teenagers, right?
I have, yeah, a nearly 16-year-old and a nearly 15-year-old. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, oh Jesus. But so I would have experiences of it, but my experiences of it would be time in my life, but then the come down was,
Yeah.
like, you know, the entire, you know, my expression used to be, you take from the happy bank and you're going to give back, because, but but then I was drinking loads of alcohol.
Yeah.
It was a total association with the festival. It was definitely more love than I had ever experienced. But then the down was like nothing. You know, it was like, you know, my belly had been scraped out in terms of, and there was no soul, there was no spirit left
Yeah.
for a couple of days. And
Yeah.
what's that? Is that it's just shit? There were shit. There was a little bit of goodness in them, but there were shit drugs.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening there. For years, I didn't recognize that alcohol can really take away from the experience of a good, you know, psychedelic experience. And I think it just competes and messes with your neuro, you know, with the dopamine and serotonin. I think it really interferes. Not to mention dehydration. You know, you maybe don't even recognize that you're getting dehydrated, and you're bombing another few pints, and it's just pushing you down this road of dehydration. And like you said, that all comes due the next day. I experienced that so many times where I would think, never again, you know, like,
Yeah, never
like
again. No.
this isn't worth it, you know.
Yeah.
And then there's that, I would say, you know, even still with all of the pill testing that's available, it feels like, you know, 90% of people that I talk to, at least, don't get their drugs tested. So you just have no idea if they've put in a little bit of ephedrine or, ketamine or something, again, that like competes or just takes your body off into a whole different direction, so that next day it just catches up with you,
Yeah.
Um,
What I've been curious about then as well, the experience, because obviously it's very close to being approved, isn't it, at the moment? MDMA
it
is
is,
for
yeah.
PTSD, is that right?
Yeah, it is. It
So
is. And
obviously then the pure molecule, they're not obviously going to be drinking. I know that that's an obvious thing, but there's obviously a way then for something like MDMA to be taken and for it to have miraculous results.
absolutely, yeah. There with any medication, there's bound to be, a bit of a downside. Like I liken it to like a surgery. Like MDMA therapy feels to me like a necessary surgery. And if you go in to have a total knee or whatever, you're having something big that's transforming inside of your neurochemistry and your mind. It's kind of a full body experience. So you're pretty much guaranteed to have a next day where you're worn out. I've spoken with neuroscientists and psychologists who are really familiar with dealing with people who've taken MDMA for psychotherapy, and they say the next day just wipe your calendar clean, even if you've had the perfect MDMA that's been tested, and you have a very controlled setting where you've done it, and you've hydrated and all the things that you should. Even so, it just works the body to go through it.
Yeah.
So
it's a kind of a tenderness, a vulnerability, which would be linked with, for me, psychedelics. That'd be in your, which I know MDMA is, but it doesn't seem like is it different than magic mushrooms and LSD? It is a different experience?
It is, yeah, it is definitely different. This has been something that from the beginning, when I thought of the idea to write about all of these different drugs, not all of them are classic psychedelics. The classic psychedelics are LSD, psilocybin, mescaline. Those tend to be the ones that tryptamines that are called psychedelics. MDMA, 5-MeO, they don't necessarily fall into a psychedelic category, but people tend to call them psychedelics just as a shorthand, But they are very different. I mean, MDMA is acting on the body in a very different way than psilocybin. It's just all that neurochemistry is just a little bit different enough to be acting in different parts of the brain. Magic mushrooms, of course, can provide visuals and can bring you to ego dissolution, like so-called like ego death. MDMA doesn't tend to bring people there. It calms down the areas of the brain that are making people very anxious, and the fight or flight kind of cause and effect that's happening in the body with people with PTSD. They're just constantly reliving their trauma and going back to their trauma. MDMA calms that part of the brain down and fires up the frontal part of the brain so that you're able to kind of walk through your trauma without being lit up by the amygdala, which is the part of the brain that's saying run, or fight. So you're able to kind of reason through your traumas and pick them apart as though it's a third person that you're talking about, while at the same time knowing that you're still yourself, but you have this distance. That's the beauty of MDMA. Psilocybin, I think, acts a little bit differently. You're just sort of thrown into, for me at least, into kind of a dream state, where also you kind of approach things in a like creative manner, right? Where you're able to look at your life in different ways and look at it in the kind of sense of being part of the universe or just part of your community. So very, very different actions.
No, I am very curious about MDMA because of obviously the experience when I'm younger, and then just recognizing that it's done in a different way, in the correct way, and now given the huge amount of, it probably will be the first of that sort of category, let's just say mind-altering category, that will be outside of cannabis, that will be approved. Is that, do you see that happening?
I do, but there's ketamine that has, I'm not sure how that looks in Europe. I believe there's ketamine use in Europe, but in the US, where I'm more focused, that has become really the first one. And again, that one is a dissociative, is how they refer to that drug. Not a psychedelic, but it tends to be called a psychedelic because it does provide people with, this kind of blast off into the universe and puts them in a frame of mind where they're able to kind of think about their problems. So ketamine really is the first that has been a couple years now that's been used, but it's different than MDMA. Different in the sense that, of course, it's a different drug, but its application. Let me see how to like best explain this. I guess it's that ketamine has been around since roughly the Vietnam War. It was used as an anesthetic.
Yeah. And
they started to see that it was helping people with depression. Like they'd come out of being under ketamine for surgery or whatever, and they would feel less depressed. So this has been known for 60 years or so. With MDMA, Rick Doblin was really the force in the 80s that sort of, I mean, there were plenty of people before him that helped move it along, but he was one of the first ones who was this activist and political force to begin the study of MDMA with MAPS, the Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Studies. And that guy has just been pushing a boulder up a hill to have this looked every which way through the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, which regulates drugs in the United States. So it kind of has more, I don't know if I'd say like more gravitas than ketamine, but I think it's been studied more and deep in a deeper way for PTSD, and has proven outstanding numbers, like something like 2/3 of the people that go through MDMA assisted therapy with like 3 sessions, like the guy Nick in my book, 2/3 of the people are, I don't know if you'd say cured, but their symptoms are lessened to such a degree that the scale that they use to test to see if a person still is experiencing MDMA, 2/3 of them say, I don't feel anywhere close to the way I did, suicidal, needing drugs, SSRIs and stuff like that. And that's amazing. I mean, that's...
Yeah, it really, I mean, in a kind of is it fair to say, in a saner world, let's just say, where money wasn't everything, this would be approved years ago?
Absolutely. Yeah, it absolutely would have. Also in a world where there wasn't the 80s, and the 70s and the war on drugs, like that was definitely a setback. So yeah, in a saner world,
and that, like, in a way, that's the kind of history, it's fair to say, if you were to say the 70s and 80s, like, because if you went back to the 50s and 40s when psychedelics seemed to be coming on the scene, at the time they were seen as mind blowing for the psychotherapists. They all looked at these and went, these chemicals are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And then it really was the late 70s, 80s, and the crackdown on, I suppose, LSD in particular. That's where it came off. Is it? That's where everything kind of came to a grinding halt.
Yeah, it is. It was, it was wrapped up in cannabis, LSD, mescaline. It was just all of this that had leaked out of the research facilities of the 50s into the free love and anti-war protests of the 60s. And by the time really Nixon came along in the 1970s, like 70, 71, he just brought the hammer down on expanding your mind, which is, they were people in colleges, kids in school, of course, that were into that through the 60s. It was a way to just go, nope, you're not going to have this.
Yeah, I remember saying to Amanda Fielding, like, something like, most of us grew up with the idea of hippie being, they're wasters, they're terrible. Like, that's the idea we grew up with, in all sincerity.
Yeah,
as opposed to, they didn't want to go to war. They believed in art and fresh food, in love, free, not quite free love, but love in general. Everything that they do was colorful and symbolic of that. And somehow that got twisted into this idea that they're terrible wasters. They should be getting a job and working 9 to 5. And what's wrong with them? Isn't it funny? Like, that's the truth, isn't it? I definitely grew up with that. Look at the bloody hippie. How?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You saw the waster in a Volkswagen van in California. It was like, I don't want to be like him.
I don't want to be happy like him.
Yeah. I don't want to be enlightened
like him, going off. He's probably going surfing in the afternoon. He's supposed to get a good job and keeping it,
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it must have, things just really, really went south during that period. It must have had to do with television and, the widespread, everything from the Vietnam War being filmed. I think it might have been the Korean War, but I think it was the Vietnam War was like the first war where it came into the living room, for people. So young kids were probably like, I don't want to go fight in that thing. There's all this information coming at them, kind of in the same way that we get so much information these days with YouTube and just with the internet. But then there was also, in the same way that we get sensationalized news, there was also the report from a newscaster talking about the kid that went out of his mind on LSD and jumped through a window. And, that was one kid probably out of tens of thousands, if not more, that had probably chemistry that was maybe going to drive them to that. And it just happened fast with LSD. But that became the narrative. It was, this stuff drives you crazy.
I always wonder, why don't they ever, when in the story of it, why don't they jump off from the ground? Why do they have to climb to the top of the building if they're so confident they're going to fly? Why don't they just go from the ground? They don't need to go off the top of the building.
Yeah, they could just do a belly flop onto the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Jump on the bed. That's, that you'll have fun. But that's, it's obvious though, in a way, that there's something else. It's not a conspiracy to imagine like that thousands of lives are ruined from alcohol, from cigarettes, from alcoholism, from all the damage of drink. I mean, it's in the thousands, the hundreds of thousands, the damage. But then the one story about this is front and center.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And back to your what you were talking about a few minutes ago, the kind of money side of this. This would have happened a lot sooner, I think, if there wasn't like the profit motive. There is the profit motive to put every kind of liquor you can think of in just about every kind of store you can think of in the United States. We can get liquor everywhere. If MDMA became legal, it's really not that expensive to make MDMA, and it won't show up in even our CVS. At our drugstore, it'll be administered by someone. So I think in a way, maybe they didn't see a way that they could make a profit from it, through the 80s or 90s. So it was maybe just kind of not studied. No one looked at what Rick Doblin was doing and thought about a way to kind of help society. It sort of blows my mind that there weren't more people looking to help veterans, for instance, or cops or paramedics who they all experience PTSD on like a daily basis. And that someone wouldn't think that there would be an alternative to Prozac. I mean, through the 80s, we were still seeing, I was as a kid, seeing Vietnam vets just destroyed by a war that happened 20 years prior to that. And then in the 90s, the Iraq war, and then 9/11 happens, and then we get into another war. So there's been no lack of the amount of people that are suffering from PTSD and just generalized anxiety.
Yeah, you don't need to go to war for something like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's about time that that this is coming to fruition for PTSD specifically, with Rick Doblin and MAPS, and now they're in phase 3, and it's looking like, I don't know, it's 2023. It could be showing up as, a legal doctor administered drug.
Wow. Yeah, you see, it'll be, what will be really interesting is, say, I studied psychotherapy for a while, and I was always curious, like at what point in the interaction I was just trying to imagine if, in a psychotherapy, so say somebody's coming for depression, or you could say that's more psychological, but I don't really think so. It depends where they're at in life, but say it's they're talking to a psychotherapist, at what point would they recommend, that maybe they'd have a few sessions and they'd kind of go, okay, look, there's a couple of roads we could go down here. One is Prozac, or one is we can just keep talking, or another is we've seen some phenomenal results with MDMA and joined up with really good therapy, and that's something. Lives could be transformed within a couple of months. Sorry, it's way less than that even. One session, and there could be an initial boom.
Yeah.
And then, I actually don't know how it's done. You could tell me about that, but I think that is just phenomenal, as opposed to people looking at their lives and all they're doing is seeing a road of life, a clear path ahead of, I'm just going to be stuck here in this, and there's no way out, or whatever the story is there.
Yeah.
To suddenly getting into a room, and for that, and for everything in a way, to be lit up and seen in a fundamentally and totally different way, and for them to walk out the other side and going, right, well, maybe life is going to be different. Maybe, maybe that possibility won't be there. I think that's beautiful.
It is. I try to not like proselytize about this, and I probably already in the 45 minutes or so that we've spoken, I'm talking about this as though it's like the magic pill, MDMA and just these in general. I have a fair amount of I don't know if I'd say skepticism, but I try to temper myself at times. It's not going to be for everyone. For instance, MDMA therapy won't cure everyone. Some people will just be like, ooh, ecstasy, no way, that's a drug. I can't touch that. But what you had said about, being on SSRIs or, kind of cognitive behavioral therapy that just goes on and on and on for years, or psychotherapy that goes on and on for years, it feels to me like managing symptoms,
Yeah.
and I'm sure people get healed through psychotherapy. And maybe when they're going through very difficult times in depression or PTSD or anxiety, that SSRIs can be really helpful. But like you said, that long road, when I think of my life 10 years from now and I'm still taking this medicine, it feels even more depressing than or as depressing.
But it is that, though. You see, if you would take the pattern, whatever, let's say one of the patterns is the thought of, I cannot see my life getting any better. I just can't see a way out of this. Now, without getting that thought, I cannot see my life getting any better, it can hold and repeat. Now that is singular in its own self, and it remains as solid, right? Now, you can just that thought is not, it's not always there, but it'll come and go, and then amongst daily life of ups and downs and fatigue and whatever, like what I'm trying to get to is that if that is there, that can be blown apart by a psychedelic.
For
so
sure.
that the thought doesn't, if the thought comes, it can just be seen as that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And so in the case, do you mind if I talk about my book?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go,
so this is like perfect place to describe.
Promote. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. It's like Nick's story, Nick Watchhorn, his story is like a perfect segue into how MDMA assisted therapy more or less works, and the benefit for a guy like him who is in that kind of tight position that you're talking about, that's kind of rinse repeat of stuck in this mindset and just not able to get out of it. So Nick Watchhorn was a policeman who arrived on the scene of the Port Arthur massacre in Tasmania, Australia in 1996. And if that doesn't ring a bell for people, it was the single worst lone gunman shooting in Australia's history, and subsequently ended up changing Australia's gun laws. And it's essentially the reason why gun laws are fairly strict in Australia. But it was such a humongous happening in Australia. Something like this hadn't happened, by comparison to America, where we see, these shootings frequently. It's sad to say, but if you hear about a mass shooting here in the US and it's not more than like 5 people, you go, oh, it was just an incident, 5 people killed, I should say. So this was 30 people, I believe the number were killed, something 20 or 30 people were wounded. It was just this like horrific situation that Nick Watchhorn showed up to and was devastated over the few days that he had to be there on the scene collecting evidence. I mean, he saw, bodies mangled, young, old, man, woman, child, just kind of difficult to like describe it. He describes it in my book, what he went through, but he had, and he didn't really identify it, but years of PTSD that he suffered from, anxiety, depression, like runaway alcohol use. He quit the police force due to just not being able to cope. And this is like a solid individual. I mean, he was probably the exact guy that you want to show up when the shit goes down and you need a cop. Like, this guy is as solid as they come. And he was just falling apart. He ends up quitting his job as a policeman. He was on the ups. I mean, he was, I think he might have been like a sergeant or lieutenant or something, anyway, moving up the ranks of the police force in Tasmania, and divorced his wife, left Australia, came to the US, and roughly 20 years later, after taking SSRIs and just loads of different medications, he is switching health plans, and it goes to a different doctor because of this, a different psychiatrist. And the guy in the Bay Area happens to just mention, hey, you're on a lot of stuff that I can't even really identify how you were given all of these prescriptions over all these years. We need to back off on some of this stuff. And by the way, and he said this on the download to him, there's this research that's being done for a person just like yourself would fit into the trials for this with MDMA. And he said, I can't, advise you to go to this. I can just give you the information on it. He had to do that for, laws around his licensing as a doctor, which in itself it's crazy, that he had to do that. So Nick subsequently goes to, or he applies for this. Something like 900 people apply for it as well. All of them have symptoms of PTSD. I think like for more than 14 years is part of the prerequisite. And he's accepted. He's one or two people that's accepted from this like group of 900 people. And he goes through this and has this kind of epic rise and fall of, it's I don't want to give too much of the book away because I'd love people to read it, but he has never tried a drug in his life, not so much as smoked a joint, he says, and I believe him. And he's going into this, pretty heavy experience with a drug that's going to take him over, and he has no idea what to expect. A really courageous act by the guy, in my opinion. And he ends up being one of the people that's those 2/3 that are essentially cured by PTSD. But what he goes through in his arc of
you can't. You've set it lovely. You've set it up lovely.
Okay,
they can check the book. They can check the book out. Because I've read it and I don't want to give it away. I think it's you've laid it. It's going to be good. But he's in the 2/3. But go and check it out.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
I have this kind of my sense of say you're very young, right? And somebody says something to you that is, see, you're very young, 3 or 4, somebody says something very shocking to you. And I think it kind of scars the brain. For whatever reason, the brain is just so soft. This is just, there's no science to what I'm saying here. It's just a thought of as to why. So say that may reappear as an intrusive thought, or it may come back. And say then you see something incredibly, even though you're an adult, and your brain is kind of hardened, let's just say, still something really shocking can scar that brain, that it doesn't change. It stays and it remains, and whatever way the body has to take it in, but there's a kind of a mark. The brain's marked the same way, like a beautiful positive memory, the brain stores it, but it's a different sort of a memory in a way. And I'm curious about like the physicality, like the brain. Obviously we just know so little. In a way we know so little about something really like that. We can say relative things about the heart, and we can say relative things about lots of other organs, but the brain, we have to tell a lot of we've to make a lot of leaps, like in the way I'm making a leap there in my language by saying a scar. But that's what it's I think it's kind of, it must be something like that though. And then then there's might be ways to create another story alongside it, say through therapy, that maybe the brain can refer to that, or cognitive behavior, so that there's a closer I'm stop me talking here, but then I'm so curious then what happens with something like a psychedelic, that I think there's a possibility for that to be, well, maybe the scar remains, but then how it's seen. Have you any idea what I'm talking about?
I do.
I
do. Yeah. I think I think you've nailed it. You aren't a scientist, so to speak about this science feels like you're just sort of making things up, but you have kids, so you've seen the way an event can turn them off, or turn them on, so you
all green things in your food is terrible.
Right
For example.
So you have some understanding of small damage that can happen to human beings. So I think in the sense of the damage that happens with people when they're young like that, and that scar, it feels to me like this stamp that gets put on someone, and it becomes like a story that people tell themselves. It just keeps getting replayed, like a little tape that plays. And anytime they have something in their life that reminds them of that thing, whatever it was that made them feel small or insignificant, whatever, they replay it, and it becomes who they are. Right. And psychedelics in general have that beautiful way of, I think it's the default mode network is what it's called, that kind of shuts off the story that we tell about ourselves, which is really just is a story. I mean, you're a likable guy. Like, there's so many nice things about you, but you may run to something, some wound that you had. If you're not feeling right today, or you had too much coffee, or you're hungover, you may run to this little wound you had. And that's the story that you kind of tell yourself. And the beauty with MDMA is those little scars or little kind of imprints, they can be, like I was saying earlier, you can kind of step back, a person can step back from themselves and kind of rewrite the story. And there's a lot of neurochemistry that's happening, but one of them is a release, they believe, of oxytocin, which is what is released in pregnant mothers or mothers and infants. It's kind of like a bonding, drawing a blank, what I think it's a neurochemical. There are things that are released in your brain, specifically when you take MDMA, that give you that feeling, the cuddle feeling that people have of MDMA. That's not just a tactile sensation that you feel on your head. Ooh, it's coming on. That is a feeling that you want to hug and be hugged, and you want to be warm with other people. And what PTSD does is pushes you away from other people in a sense, and drives you kind of into your those thoughts, those little wounds that you've had. But when you're on a drug like this, you're able to feel that warmth and that comfort, and that you're worthy, while at the same time distancing yourself from that trauma, while at the same time having the front of your brain lit up. And I always, when I say this, I always feel funny saying it, but part of the MDMA is methamphetamine. That's what is a part of this molecule. So it keeps that frontal lobe lit up. So you're thinking, and all your cognitive, forces are being brought to the forefront. So you're able to creatively, excuse me, you're able to creatively problem solve. And all these things together make this kind of like super force. And here I am, like, being evangelical about this, because I really do. The more I learn about this, and the more I hear of, good outcomes, it's like, boy, all of the things that are happening here, it's about as magical as heart surgery must have been 40 years ago, when they were like, the ventricle does this and this part does that, and it's machinery. While a lot of, like you said, the brain is still a mystery to us, there are parts of the brain where they know, from doing tests on rats and doing tests on MRIs on human beings, that light up during these certain times. So they can make less of a big leap. They can say this lights up and that lights up. This has to be the oxytocin flooding the body. This has to be the brain going through a cognitive checklist of, how do I get over this trauma? How do I print over this trauma, and have this trauma not be my main story I tell myself? And that, I don't know if I've lost people there with that kind of description.
No, but it is, but in a way, the only difference, I think the word loop is a good word, because loops are exposed in psychedelics. So whatever the loop might be playing, they can be tiny little loops, and normally you can be taken on a loop, and then somehow you kind of go, oh God, I have to go, I'm doing that again.
Yeah.
And it seems a little bit crazy to go back through a loop again. Let's just say whatever that thought. Whereas if you were to kind of look at the daily loops that are happening in the mind, sure, they're crazy. And there's loops upon loops upon loops upon loops about food, about such and such humans, they're just playing out. But in psychedelics, I think the loops are exposed to be those, and they kind of don't, it's not like you can find a start or an end point to them, that there isn't necessarily, if you know what I mean. And if you're even to go deep into that, you kind of go, well, there's the loop of me, and all that holds with it, so that there's an apparent starting point, which is the loop. Me, I'm me and whatever I am, and my name, my age, or whatever, all those things that appear in the loop of me, let's just say, who I am, what my job, and blah, 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 blah. And then the sensed feeling that I'm here, I'm definitely in here. But it is, in a way, loops upon loops upon loops. One, gazillions of loops. Like I was talking to somebody late one night, and we were talking about that there's loops around some planet that they go out so far, you can't see them to a certain point until they come back in. And I think that's kind of like in life, big loops and small loops. And some of these loops can be traumatic.
Absolutely. The loop of your family and the loop of your career. I mean, though, you're right. That's a perfect word to describe that. And I think these little loops that you create when you're young, or that are created, upon you from traumas big and small, they can just continue to do that. Like a song, your bug or whatever they call it, that gets caught in your head. I'll sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, kind of half awake, and I'm trying to work out one line that I've written that day that I didn't like, and I'll write it literally 100 times in my head, and I can't stop it. It just goes.
Oh God.
And I think just the way a song would, where you're like, get that freaking song out of my head. But I think psychedelics do expose how futile those loops can be, and how they aren't useful, and to sort of do away with them, replace. I don't know if you replace them with something better, but maybe it's like, this doesn't serve me anymore.
Yeah, in a way, they're just happening.
They're
really just happening. Because if you were the one who figured out what loops to ring, to play, it doesn't. It doesn't. Where are you located then, that you're replaying this loop and that loop? But anyway, we're going down a lovely rabbit hole there. But do you know what I'm saying? Like, where
I do.
You could say they're just happening.
They're just happening, like the wind is sort of always happening. The waves are always rolling. Yeah. Now and again, you go and you look at the waves, or you see the wind because a tree swirls in a beautiful way. But those loops are just happening. And maybe the thing about traumas are, you focus in on that wind, and it really makes you cold and messes your hair up at the wrong time.
Yeah, and maybe it's the loudest one, and obviously some can affect, the whole mechanism of the body. I don't know enough about that. But yeah, I mean, it is unlike, in terms of let's say the human being, and you were kind of saying you're skeptical. I'm very skeptical too. So I think we're both logical. We want the data. You want to be able to say, like, obviously, there might be some confirmation bias if you've had great experiences that you'll go looking, but all the same, but in a way, it's quite good that it has to go through. It's a pity it's so slow, but that they're going through all of these tests, and that there will be no doubt then, when it's done, to say, well, 7 out of 10 people experience dramatic results, 2 out of 10 people don't, and some experience overwhelmingly phenomenal results. You know what I mean? So the science will guide this, which is good for the area. So then it takes all the opinion out of it. It takes, like when I spoke to Robin Carhart Harris, he was kind of he's very conservative in his tone, and I kind of like that, because somebody has to kind of just guide it so it gets over the line, and that it is approved and it is brought.
Absolutely. I think that was the value of Michael Pollan's book.
Yeah.
For me, it was, he's this very erudite professor, UC Berkeley, Harvard. Hearing it from him that there was something here and shining a light on it made a lot of people feel like, okay, someone's speaking about this with, I mean, he did do a lot of the drugs, so he was in there with it, including 5-MeO, which we have to get on to 5-MeO. Yeah, but someone like him, and Robin Carhart Harris, Paul Stamets, all of those guys who have dedicated their lives really to this or to serious conversations, in Paulin's case, serious conversations around food, and, eating better. I mean, he's a guy that people will listen to.
Yeah, he's very credible. Yeah, he really
he's
is.
very
Yeah,
credible.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think it needs that. Like, I remember back when I was caught by this, and I went to this conference on psychedelics in Amsterdam, that kind of just blew me away, the professionalism. This is because I had been to business ones over the years, these conferences, whatever is going on in them, and to have so many credible people really opened my eyes to the industry. But what I might, I'm curious to kind of bring you back in time. So you were obviously familiar with, so cannabis obviously grabbed you, and psychedelics, but what happened in, were you very young when you happened upon psychedelics, or how did you actually kind of get pulled into this? I know we talked about your writing in the area, but your own, you mentioned literature, I think, for college.
Yeah.
So it's a very distinct industry, to go into.
It is. It is. Yeah. I was just kind of wayward, loved reading books as a kid. And it was really just almost like a liberal arts, like one of those, I'm going to college, everyone in my family went to college. So I thought, okay, English literature sounds good. Perhaps I'll teach. We'll see when I get through with it, what I do with it. But my first experience, like a lot of people, did happen in college at the University of California in Santa Barbara, which is absolutely gorgeous campus. It's this just like, they call it the Club Med experience of universities, like 90 miles north of Los Angeles. And it's just beautiful beachside, mountains rising up a couple thousand feet, just your kind of blonde babes, everywhere, people riding bikes. It really, really beautiful place to go to school, and a good school. It's actually become a better school since I went there like 25 years ago. A friend of mine showed up with some magic mushrooms, and I had quite a bit of fear, because growing up through the 80s, the story was you're going to go crazy. That guy we talked about jumping off the building with LSD. So I was scared to death the first time someone was like, okay, let's do this. Yeah. And I ended up having, what I'm not sure at the time, but I wasn't sure at the time, but looking back on it, real close to like ego dissolution. I mean, we took a big amount. Neither one of us really knew what we were doing, and walked all around the campus in these lagoons. I had a moment where I felt like Beowulf, the creature from that famous story, was coming out of the lagoon and chasing me. I had this like gorgeous experience with these little plants and these trees that we were climbing on. I mean, it was really like a full 8-hour experience of like one of the top experiences of my life, I have to say, which is kind of odd to call a psychedelics experience a top experience, but that was my first time, and it was expansive is the only way I could say it. It changed my mind about how dangerous they were, but also made me think this is not something to be trifled with. You could very easily take this into a very bad area if you weren't careful or with the right people or in the right place.
But in a way, I mean, I know they're obviously acceptance everything, but that is kind of part of the nature of them, in the sense that maybe some that can get addicted, but the nature of them really is because it's 8 hours, and there's a wondrous relief when it's over too. We don't talk about that, but it's kind of like, oh God, back to this. I'm very happy to be back here.
Yeah.
I got to tell my mommy I love her.
Right,
do you know what I mean? It's not like you're going to go, right, let's get back going again.
No, you're right. They actually refer to them as anti-addictive, because directly after, yeah, you have that response of like, ooh, I've been through something here, and I don't need to jump right back into this. I can kind of reflect on it. But that's, yeah, that was my first experience. And there's something key that I don't think I've ever spoken about in when I do interviews like this. Just prior to that, I had interviewed Timothy Leary.
Wow.
So yeah, I sorry, it wasn't just prior to that. It was just after that. I managed into a job where I was working for this magazine, and Leary, this was in 1996. He was available for an interview, and
That's sorry, there's something unbelievably synchronistic about psychedelics, but we might talk about that.
Yeah, the synchronicity for sure. And specifically, I mean, in general, but 5-MeO has a particular kind of fascinating thing with synchronicity that occurs. Like people that I've interviewed have said that. But the Timothy Leary thing kind of set me off into this this direction that in the last 25, 30 years since then, I guess it's 25 years, I thought, boy, that really set a tone for me interviewing this guy at such a young age, when I wasn't a guy who was doing psychedelics all the time. I was, so-called like good kid. I had some pints pretty frequently in college, but like I didn't get high or anything like that. And here I am actually laying in bed with Timothy Leary, because he would die like a month after the interview I did, which was like just kind of skyrocketed my writing all of a sudden. Laying in bed with him and just kind of like, it was a very long interview. It was like 3 or 4 hours, and doing nitrous balloons with him, because that towards the end of his life, that was what kind of gave him pain relief and like a little kick. Yeah.
Wow. Jesus.
It was a trip. There's a lot more to that story, but that set me off onto this path that, in a circuitous way, years later, I would then, after Fantastic Fungi, come to like, of course I should be writing about this,
Yeah, Jesus, that is going from being really scared of psychedelics to taking them, and then to interviewing in a really short space of time, probably one of the loudest voices, for better and for worse, the loudest voices in the area. I'm not quite sure why it was seen as the negative about him, but I think it was probably down to the whole dropout thing. I don't know why. But,
he kind of sensationalized it. He really threw it in the face of the government, of like, he wasn't afraid to be loud, and say, this is our right to be able to do this. And he got in with hippie culture, which immediately tainted him. He was a respected psychiatrist, I believe he's a psychiatrist, from Harvard, and then departed that. And I think whenever you depart that mindset and that kind of academia, you're a
freak then.
You're a freak. You're a freak. And he was also very much like a P.T. Barnum kind of character. So he deserves that, that rep that he got.
But that's it. There is something about them, the synchronicity though, and this that's the part you can't, but you can give examples. I can give a load of examples, but there is something about them. For something like that to happen, you kind of go, well, yeah, that kind of, it doesn't seem out of the ordinary, but it's quite enjoyable. The fact that these people seem to come your way and you end up having conversation. I think there's a kind of a energetic sensing, but again, I've no data here, but I like my data.
It's hard to have data in a situation like this.
But I think there's a kind of a sensing. If you talk to somebody who's taken psychedelics, there is a sensing that they have. I can't describe what that is exactly, but I feel like I could sense within a short period of time somebody who's taken them and versus who hasn't. And it's just, it's openness. And there's a kind of an openness. there in the character that is not so much there with people who haven't. Or maybe it's energetic, but there's the amount of times I'd kind of just find, and then I'd get my way into the conversation to ask, well, have you ever had an experience? And then they will talk about, and more than likely, it'll be like, even recently, a few months ago, I was talking to somebody and they refer to psychedelic incident as a kind of a really positive reason about their life, as just one thing that happened. And but do you know what I'm talking about? That there is that kind of openness, or
I do. I definitely feel that openness, and I can sense when someone hasn't had a personal experience. I interview a lot of people that are on the business side of this.
Yes.
And they're fantastic people that I think I wonder, if they've had an experience themselves, and they'll be CEOs, CFOs, they're working for companies that are putting lots of money into psychedelics. And as the conversation goes on, I'm like, yep, I was right. This person hasn't had an experience. So I feel that kind of like a little radio signal like that you're talking about. But it is this kind of openness, and I'm not sure how to
I think it's harder to be. Now, obviously, you can be wrong. But it's harder to be an asshole. It's harder to be an asshole if you've taken it, because there's an overwhelming humbleness from it that is unavoidable, really. I think that whatever way you get into it, there is a vulnerability that is exposed that is stunning.
Yes.
But, and I think maybe I think it just eases all the rigid structures of the character, the judgments. Not that the judgments don't happen, of course they do, but I think it kind of breaks a lot of the edges of the rigidity of the character. But
yes.
Again, I don't know,
Definitely it breaks that rigidity off. Yeah, I've had a personal experience with a friend recently who hadn't had an experience since they were like in their 20s, and it wasn't the greatest experience. They very difficult, and they were turned off. And now, like a lot of people in her 50s, she came around to trying this and had the full ego death with psilocybin, and really confronted herself and confronted some things that she'd been going through. And the last few weeks, I can see that a less rigidity. I can see that those edges, those sharp edges that were there before, are gone. It's amazing, and I haven't been able to really tell them, because I didn't want to say, you were this before and now you're this. I haven't figured out a way.
You were a bollocks beforehand.
Yeah.
But now you're not so much of one.
Now you're not so much, yeah. But I see that with people for sure, and I have felt that with myself. It's.
Well, like there's no, like I had an experience once, and I remember whatever way it went, I could see it was like having a board meeting with every single member of my ancestry, not every single, but let's just say maybe 10 or 15. And
all the important ones.
All the important aunties and uncles of different voices. And it was kind of like, all right, that gnarly voice that's going on? Who's that? Who's that voice?
Yeah, what is that?
I don't know, auntie. And the auntie just goes, and I kind of, well, can we all agree we don't need that voice anymore? That voice is absolutely useless, and it's just, can we all agree on that? Vote. But
get her out of here.
Get her out of here. But it's just so random that you're hearing all of these, you're seeing things in just totally different ways.
Yeah. People's psychedelic stories fascinate me. I know a lot of people, it's like when you hear someone telling their dream and they're going on for a few minutes, you're like, okay, there can't be more to this that's worth telling.
Yeah.
But when people tell me their stories and they're succinct, I'm fascinated by them. A guy told me about an incident where he had some liquid LSD left over in a vial, and he thought he had barely anything left, and he swished around some water inside what was left in the vial. Took it one evening, and he had this experience where, I mean, there was way more than he thought was in it, and went just off his head completely. And he ended up, after kind of going through the labyrinths that you'll go through, sitting at this table with three people that looked like, alien kind of outer space sort of people. And they said, "Oh, you finally made it here." And he had this conversation with them that was just like, it blew my mind. Like he had, whether he had concocted this or whether this is the nature of, how we can transcend to a place and find some answers. It blew my mind that he got to that in his mind. And he had been trying to work out some things with his family and stuff. And he was like, after that, I kind of got this this answer that I was looking for, which that's the beautiful part of psychedelics. You kind of confront yourself, and you sort of I've heard people say that you are the medicine, and it really is true. Like your stories play out like a film, and if you get lucky, or if you maybe have thought about this enough in a positive way, you end up somewhere like that guy did, and get some real beautiful answers.
Yeah.
And that's one of the fascinating things about psychedelics that keeps driving me to talk about this.
Yeah, well, you see, that's it in a way. That's 8 hours as opposed to 8 months.
Yeah.
That's the. What's your sense of this idea of ego dissolution? What do you think that is?
God, I mean, in the simplest way, it feels to me like that part of the brain that tells your story, that default mode network, or blanking on the exact name, it shuts you off like a hard stop on your computer when you're having trouble. Just sort of shuts that off. That is the simplest way to say what I think ego dissolution is, that it's just turning off everything that you tell yourself about yourself, which can often be negative stories that we get stuck on. In a more complicated way, life is the dream, and the kind of the trip that we're going through, and getting to that ego dissolution and that unitary consciousness, that no me, no it, no us. You arrive in something that is boundless. I hear it described a lot with 5-MeO as that boundlessness. That is reality, I think.
Yeah. If I said to you there was no you now, there isn't a you, how when you hear that, what does it sound like to you? There is no you. No you doing anything. There's just what's happening.
For me, it used to confuse me and make me feel uneasy, and my Catholicism would come leaping out at me and all these thoughts. Now, when you just said that, I feel at ease, and I feel a calmness, and I feel a kind of odd blending with you. You know what I mean? Like you're me and I'm you. I feel a comfort, and that boundless oceanic nothingness, which is maybe kind of our reward at death. Like we unleash the bonds of this thing that we have concocted, and we get to just be floating in nothingness.
and what if I said this is floating in nothingness now, this appearing as whatever it does, like whatever sounds we're making, whatever words that we kind of, it appears like words or things, and that this is life, and we're talking about something that's definitely real, and yet like life and death, and all of those ideas of what this is are still don't touch. And even the word boundless binds boundlessness into a word called boundless. This is already boundless. And what, but you see, I think the movement is to know boundlessness. And then that's where it becomes but it only exists as this in almost the moment you open your mouth, it's separation begins. Like, in the beginning was the word.
Yeah.
And this is the beginning now. But it always seems like in time that there's a story of a beginning and an end, and like even the start of a sentence. But like this is boundlessness appearing as two talking, but already this is home. But there can't, so there isn't an ego to die. There isn't a dissolution of an I. There'd have to be one already. There's already no one. I'm just, there's already no one, and everybody's going around thinking that they're me's and that they're in there operating, and they'll accept that they can't grow the nails or the teeth or the hair or the heart or any tiny thing, but they are absolutely convinced they're doing the thinking. Now, that's just what's appearing. And the beauty, this boundlessness that you're, is that beyond the words, beyond any description.
That's right.
There's just this, like.
Yeah. It is beyond words. That's why, the complicated, it becomes very ephemeral very quickly to talk about this. I can only talk about kind of, I guess, how it feels. And that nothingness feels good to me, it feels so, it feels good that this conversation that we're having could be just a little blip in the thought of something that's dreaming, or that just is.
It just is, yeah. This is nothingness full to the brim with whatever, with the sound of this.
With stuff,
with shit. Yeah. And I suppose sometimes Alan Watts said things like, once you get the message, hang up the phone.
Yeah.
And now, in a way, really, that makes it seem like there's a message, that the message that there's no message is the message. In a way, you go around the houses, and I suppose what I'm talking about now, there's a couple, like with psychedelics, they're used for therapeutics, and I think that's amazing. They're also used in a kind of a spiritual, like the likes of ayahuasca and I suppose 5-MeO. They're all used as a kind of a way to get someone somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? And there's always an idea, and like there's the somewhere else, there's the somewhere else, and there's the person. And it's basically all that ever happens is this all the time. It keeps pushing away when, and I think in a way that's how sometimes people keep coming back. Oh, I need to clear this. I need to get this done and this done, so that then I can feel the oneness.
Yeah.
But and it's never seen then that I can feel the oneness is the step away almost. There's me and oneness,
right? This is kind of the issue or sort of confusion I have with setting an intention before you go into a psychedelic experience. Like that's something that people talk about and it's become like quite popular. I wish I could set no intention, sort of just have nothing, try to quiet everything, so that when I do fall into it, I can fall a little closer. I'm not falling into an expectation or chasing something in there. It's so abstract to talk about this, but I want to lessen my thinking and lessen my expectations, I guess, so that I could have, I don't know, like a greater chance at success, which is nothing.
Well, you see, that's the story you're saying anyway, but it's like kind of, going into, say, a conversation and kind of we'll have the view, we're going to talk about this anyway, that's our, we'll talk about this or this, and never in a gazillion years could we predict where we'd go, really. Right. But there's sort of a kind of a safety in, and that's the nature of the mind is, well, I wish that I wouldn't have so intention, so that I could have a better experience, more nothing experience. But like, if this is already nothing, full to the brim with wanting to experience nothing. Do you know what I mean? That's that intention. I mean, it's just what's happening then. You're going in to take psychedelics, and there's thoughts about, oh, I don't want to set an intention. I'd like to just see what it's like for not. And yet, really, 8 hours is a long time. So the intention is probably dealt with.
Yeah, it's just unfolding, right?
It's just unfolding, yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, so you've done a book on MDMA, 5-MeO book. You have written the book as well?
I'm in the process of that one.
Yeah. I saw the cover then somewhere, I think.
Yeah. It's so that one, there's just so much happening around that substance that I keep adding to it, and I keep coming across people that tell me interesting stories. And Mike Tyson's very vocal about it. There's the boxer Jake Paul, and people. It's popping up everywhere. There's speed toting in Tulum. I don't know if you've seen like articles on that where people are just kind of dropping in like a hair salon kind of visit and just boom, getting rocketed out to the. Right. Yeah, I know. And
I just had the whoo. Yeah,
I could see that. And just to preface this, I think people are surprised by this, but this is one substance that I haven't tried, so I kind of have no dog in the fight, so to speak. Like I am approaching this one completely objectively, and I feel I did with the MDMA book as well. I did keep myself out of it, but this book I'm approaching purely from an objective standpoint, with all the people that I've interviewed. You guys, your film actually is a piece of it that I talk about. Yeah. Your story, just a few regular guys setting out like you did to experience this. It had an impact on me at a time when I was good like 4 or 5 months into doing my research for it. And I told you that, was it Boris that was the director?
Yes. Yeah.
That the film felt to me like touching the void, that beautiful mountaineering film.
Oh yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it had. Is that what the movie Touching the Void?
Yeah.
Touching the Void. Yeah, it had this kind of like calm in the face of something harrowing that is about to happen. It just had a hit a note for me that propelled me further into the writing of my book, and of course interviewed you for Forbes, and have interviewed so many people. And just recently, I don't know if you saw this, but this made kind of a nice little splash with Lucid News, who I write for. There is a laboratory in Chicago that has created the first cell-based parotid gland of a Sonoran desert toad, which is where toad toxin comes from. So they've created this, essentially like in a petri dish. They've made the cells that are required to make the toxin, the 5-MeO, which is a big leap for a lot of reasons. One of them is conservation of the toad, because they're under stress. Like they're not necessarily going extinct yet, but they're definitely being captured in huge numbers and messed with, in a way that's not really very ethical. So this is kind of an answer to that, but also it's a way to create a version of everything that's inside of the toad toxin, which includes bufotenine and all of these other little molecules, and then also 5-MeO, and to pull them apart and see if there's like an entourage effect of what you're feeling, as opposed to the pure molecule synthetic creation of 5-MeO in a laboratory. So this is the first occasion of this happening. Yeah, it's pretty cool. But that just happened like 2-3 weeks ago. So I keep adding layers onto this book. It's become this big, kind of unwieldy thing.
And I'm going to ask you, like, obviously, you haven't.
I haven't.
You haven't.
I haven't.
I can almost feel like
I
So
know.
tell me, is reticence like it's an interesting. Like I had it for years because I saw these things going on, and but what is your feeling about it?
So to put it simply, I feel I'd go mad. I
Yeah.
feel
Okay.
it would be too much for me. You know, you hear potent, powerful, the most, associated with 5-MeO. I feel not prepared, which is a strange way to phrase it. I know, because I write about this and I'm deep, deep into the science of it and the culture of it, and really seeing a full spectrum of what it is. But I have moments where I'm like, okay, right, I know someone who can set me up. It's not a controlled substance in Canada and in Mexico. It's very easy for me to get to these places. Mexico, even through the pandemic, it's not that hard lately for me to get down there. Still, I have these moments where I go, nope, not right.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would accept it in a way that would be productive for me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, like from like I was extremely reticent, and it's because I had you see, when you read about it, you can't, it's kind of mind-blowing when you read about it. Like, it's amazing that you can read about an experience and go, okay, well, this is not your normal experience. And so and then I had a couple of opportunities. I did I think there was a movie. There was another movie about Bufo Alvarius, and this lady was promoting it in Ireland, and I did a small little podcast with her. She told me about her experience. I did another podcast with this programmer dude, and he told me about his, and he said it was one of the greatest experiences of his entire life. And then 3 or 4 opportunities came up, and every time it was no, I have to want, there has to be some excitement about wanting to do it. Yeah. And it was just fear. And then obviously we were doing the movie, and then we stumbled upon Ollie, and Ollie kind of did talk about non-duality a little bit, and that's an area that I'm interested in, and I was interested in, and the way he spoke, that it's basically was the known versus unknown. I knew I was going into the unknown, but I needed at least some sort of knowing part. But all the way, the build up, I was kind of going every time, I don't know if I'll do it. I don't know. Let's see what happens. Because I think there's the appearance now that we know everything. So, like, life is safe, whatever. Yeah. And what we think we want is safety. And yet at the same time, we crave, or really what we need is discomfort and new experiences, because then afterwards, once we know them, we'll talk about, oh, you should try this, you should taste this food, whatever. Like, I don't know what you're like. If my wife suggests a new restaurant to me, I go, can we not go to such and such a place? But then when I go to the new place, I kind of go, oh, it's amazing. Everybody, more than likely somebody else will recommend it, and then we'll go. But my long way around is going, so then something like this comes along, and it is obviously it is everything you read about it. It's a mind-blowing experience. So what is that like? Well, so I'm not going to encourage you one way or another, but all I can do is say is I totally empathize with the fear about it. I was afraid, but the fear was there as well. Like, if you had to go and take, you might know LSD, but if I said to you, okay, here, drop a couple of tabs now, you go, no. Or you might go, okay, bring it on. But you know what I mean? You're still stepping off the cliff. Whereas this one, I can't say whether you will go mad or not go mad, or what way it'll be. But yeah, I mean, I don't see anything but the fear is just the fear, is all I would say about it. But it deserves all the respect and fear, in my mind anyway, that it gets. Because even when you mentioned it, I got this the enormity of it as well.
Expansive is what I think of it, and meeting other, going to other cultures, new places to eat food, and meeting new people. I mean, those are all expansive experiences that I love. I bring on discomfort in that way. I like surfing, and that can be really challenging. You can put yourself into some dangerous situations. So there's a part of me that goes, yes, this will be good for me. I think it might have to do with partly, I don't want to blame it on her, but Jennifer, my fiance, is like, we've got a pretty good life right now, and don't go fucking that up. Like don't do something that sort of like, what resounds in my head, Frank, all the time when I think about this is your line from your film. I don't want 5 going and telling me I can't have a wine and a ciggy. Something like that.
I know, it's so kind of basic, but
yeah,
in a way I didn't want to change the things that I loved.
Yeah, and the things that those aren't damaging unless you've got a 3-pack a day habit. I guess you could say that's damaging.
Yeah, cute little smoke. It doesn't bother anybody. But but also then there's the feeling of what was it? Something you said earlier as well. This idea of, oh yeah, you kind of mentioned the corporate people. I can imagine. Well, they don't want to do it because there is the connotation that they won't have their life back.
Right.
That's the image that you won't.
Yeah.
I won't get my life back, or I'll be wearing pink clothes. I don't want to wear hippie clothes, or whatever image. I think I had an image. I don't want suddenly not to be wearing black. But they're all kind of just, in a way. You see, you don't already have life, so that's why life is actually unsafe as it is. It's just it's already unsafe.
Yeah,
it's already edgy. It's already the edge of the cliff. So you just don't have this. Nobody has life. Nobody has the sky, and nobody has life. So then, that's why sure, who would come back together again and not be mad or not be mad? There's just but there could be, of course, like there was trauma. I would describe, somebody joked to me, went, oh, do you need to go and do some MDMA, Frank, after your 5-MeO experience to do the trauma? That was my brother. And I kind of went, there's kind of a point there. But I would describe there was a physiological flashback to the experience. So what's that? Is it a PTSD? It was pure physical, like in the morning, waking up in the middle of the night, and it's just impossible to describe. But that kind of just played out. Then you know what I mean. And I think it was greater and lesser degrees to. I think Boris had it a little bit. I don't think Charles had too much flashbacks, but that's. But all I'm saying is, then that would be, but some people their flashbacks are just, they're like freebies. They go, whoa, it's brilliant. I wake up and go,
I get another hit.
Yeah.
I've recently been asked, I'm always, not always, but I would say on every couple week basis, I'm offered that experience from people. Being in the position I'm in, I'm constantly talking with people about this substance in particular. And I've been offered to go to a fairly posh situation in Mexico, and to write about it. I would write about the experience. And there's a part of me that says, God, why wouldn't you do that? Why not? And then this other little barking area over here just says, not quite right. So I want like the sort of big yes, like you had with Ollie. Or
are you writing about this now? Just these, the way you're describing it, are you writing just even that? It's really interesting. I sometimes wish that I'd kind of written it down a little bit. Even all the fears and whatever,
I am including that. Yeah, this story is a lot, even though I take an objective viewpoint, I try to. I include myself in this story in the sense that it scares the shit out of me, and how ridiculous that is, considering at a young age, I interviewed Timothy Leary, and I've had a few milestones like that in my life where it's like, of course you're the guy that would do this, write about this. So my character arc, I guess you'd say, through the story is, it's kind of important to put into the story, and it's not written yet. I mean, there could be chapter 20 where I'm like, okay, I guess, or I am ready for this. And
the peak of a psychedelic, say mushroom, psilocybin, strong enough psilocybin trip. But when you get to the apex, that there is a kind of an apex loop. It's kind of like that in some ways, only in very subtle ways, except there's no, you go from, it's like a ferry versus a rocket ship. I think I've used that analogy before.
Yeah.
And there's no room to negotiate having a good experience or not having a good experience. You're not really there to do anything at all. It's just, there's no, and then but see, it is like I always say that we probably will talk about it forever, because it's a kind of it's almost trying to remember some of the, why was it shocking? Why was it unbelievable? Why was it phenomenal? But it's just, in the end, it becomes an experience, and having a cup of coffee is an experience, but this is an outrageous experience.
But outrageous.
But even then, outrageous. It's an experience. But I could describe a morning coffee to you, and I make good coffee. Like, it's just that it's kind of safe, whereas this is, I'm very curious to see, because I can remember your reticence back when we were talking.
Yeah. It's less so than it was then. Do you feel like fundamentally changed by it, or?
It's so hard to put proportions on change and on ideas of change. Well, like, we're always kind of changed. So when do you kind of put the point? Where is that which changes?
Right.
Isn't anything that changes, except body and the old face and the eyes and the glasses and whatever, but there is something that, let's say, there is an unchangingness, and yet, I don't know, it's hard to describe. So I don't know, some people, I remember coming back, I was kind of disappointed. I was kind of going, oh, I'm still feeling like I need to get somewhere. And I'm still feeling like I didn't get what I was looking for. And then somehow that particular movement, just the whole thing kind of ended. The seeking for other. It all just came to it's not, and then everything just goes on, life goes on, but it's just an ordinary life. But I would say that, it was in spite of. It's hard to describe that end because nothing ended then. It was just the seeing through. It was like that loop I was talking about, in a way that the me is, the sense of self is a kind of a loop. And that ended in the sense that, loops don't start or end. They just, circles don't start or end.
Yeah.
That's, I don't know if that.
It's a tough one to answer. That did get me closer to what I was looking for.
There's nothing that can end. Like, there'd have to be something inside that could end.
Okay.
There. There'd have to be something in there apart from, navigating the system underneath, behind the eyes there, operating the whole thing, that could suddenly come to an end. It's just the loop that is maybe seen. It just stops. I don't know. It ends. Seeking for other than this ended is a good way to say it. But that doesn't make it any better or worse, because
it is, in my mind, though, a change, and that's a change for the better, I think. So that's nice. I know we're nearing, like a 2-hour point where we probably have to wrap it. I'm fine to just keep chatting, but I didn't want to miss asking you a question about something that's happening in Ireland. Do you know the company GH Research?
Oh, keep talking anyway, because I know I've stumbled upon some, if it's to do with 5-MeO, but it is. Tell me more.
So they're based in Dublin, and they are laser focused on 5-MeO specifically. A lot of companies that work in biotech and psychedelics, kind of a range of molecules they work with. These guys are on 5-MeO for treatment resistant depression, and things are looking good. They're in like phase 2. They've had $310 million of capitalization already. Like, but yet they're kind of going under the radar. I mean, people like us who are kind of attuned to it. And, you know, I have a Google alert set whenever 5-MeO pops up in the ether out there. But these guys are kind of just creeping under the radar, and it's so odd that there's that kind of money and that it's happening in Dublin. Like, it's just.
So, but they must then, you know, we talked about other corporate scenarios. They must have had an experience then. I think it's so distinct and so short.
They
to
must
take somebody else's word for something that's 10 minutes long. I find it very hard to believe that.
Yeah, I think so. They're connected with researchers at Maastricht. Is that how you say it? University?
Maastricht, yeah. That's
Maastricht.
in Europe, yeah. Okay, Central Europe.
Yeah. There are a couple of people that I think sit on the board or advisors. They must have personal experience as well as deep research. Like, I think they've been looking at this for years. But that's just another thing that popped up in this last year. That it was like, sent me down a whole other road, as well as Beckley SciTech is doing. Amanda Fielding's son is the head of that. Cosmo,
yeah. Do you talk to these guys? Would you talk to the GH one? And is it GH?
I do talk. I interviewed Cosmo last year, and I've been trying to get through to the people at GH, but they're just impenetrable. I haven't been able to get to them. I've tried every which way. I know the people that had a part in the IPO. They went public last year, and I thought that might be a way to get in. I don't think they trust press for, probably for a good reason.
Yeah, well, you're slightly different. To be fair,
I feel like I'm a little bit different, so I'm just, maybe they're watching this. Someone I'd love to talk to.
Yeah, because I think I was curious about. See, it's hard to know in our. Sometimes I think in our movie, it doesn't. For the real advocates, I wonder, did they go, well, you didn't do this right, you didn't do that right, or if you're trying to start a business on it, would they look at it and go, yeah, that's not doing anything for my product, let's just say. What do you think, or what's your sense
of your movie?
If you're somebody and you're running a business for 5-MeO, because I think I tried to get in touch. I don't know what my angle was with that company, but then I was curious about our movie. Would it do any favors for?
I feel it would in some sense, because like I said before, you guys are, kind of like the everyman, and it's, you approached it with respect, and you approached it as, adding to your life. It wasn't just for a goof. So it feels to me like it would be useful. I pointed a lot of people who are, very serious about getting over problems, like small problems, big problems in their lives. I pointed them towards your film and said, these are guys that just had real pure intentions. And, whatever you think about the full film, like, the beauty of it is their intentions are the thing that most people are after who get intrigued by this as a treatment. So, like, I could see it helping them. My book too, I've actually struggled a little bit to get my book on MDMA, which is short. It's really kind of an abridged story on MDMA. I've struggled to get it into areas where it feels like it could be useful for the all the powers that are working towards making MDMA basically a business. It's been, Rick Doblin wrote the foreword to my book. Like, I have a new version that I've just released mid last year, But as far as getting some of the other biotech companies to look at it, I've felt real resistance, and I've thought, wow, that's weird, because I feel it would be like a public service announcement that they would
Yeah,
go,
it's a bang on case study on it.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
and your film too, same kind of thing. So I don't know, maybe they're kind of insulated. I think they're probably, for liability reasons, maybe they don't want to have a close association with anything that's outside their spectrum.
That appears like it's recreational, maybe, yeah. But then you mean yours is evidently not. Yours is pure case study. So
Mine is, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And I will put the links. But I stumbled upon you. It wasn't from Forbes. I think I stumbled upon you from something about your neighbors are doing psychedelics. Is that right? Did you have something like that? Did I imagine?
Yeah, that's the one. That's my. It began as a series, and I was wanting to write about all different substances, and starting with MDMA. So it's Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics. MDMA
Yeah.
is
Okay.
the name of
Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
that
Okay.
book. Yeah, and then
Okay.
then the next one was going to just continue. Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics, 5-MeO, and just kind of go down the line. And I have been on MEO for so long that it's become this different thing. It's not part of the series, so I'm not positive what it is, what if it's connected to this series or not. I'm kind of a little bit in the weeds for what it is, but it's part.
I was convinced that it was perfect opportunity when I saw that title. I was convinced that it would make an unbelievable TV show
Oh,
to
really?
follow.
Yeah.
Oh, I was when I saw it's a good year and a half, 2 years back. Then I would have seen that first, and
Yeah.
I could see, they bring in people, and you'd have different people every period of time, and following their progress, actually just seeing that they stay in a house. So anyway, that was where my brain went with that.
That's good to hear that from a filmmaker. I've heard that several times, and have been, how it happens in that industry. You're connected with someone, and people get really excited. So that I have heard that, and had people interested, but connecting the dots on that, I think psychedelics need to get a little further, probably. I don't know, like the retreats are definitely making headway. People are attending those quite a bit. Oregon is gonna make a big push. So yeah, I would very much be interested in like trying to make something like that happen, because I have just gobs of interviews.
Yeah, I see. It would be like it's just that they're dramatic experiences, and to be able to somehow, you see, it's the appropriateness, I suppose, they can't be seen to promote. So that's the problem. But because they're so dramatic and so transformative, and we love our transformations, like we do it with houses and foods and restaurants and everything.
Yeah.
So people being transformed and that being captured would be very interesting.
You're right. I mean, it would fit perfectly.
It would. It's probably be done,
into a 30-minute segment. I could see that.
Yeah, you'd need to have control.
Yeah.
Very good. Yeah. So that's kind of your project at the moment is 5-MeO.
Yeah.
And it's funny you even have an alert for it. It's yeah.
I do. Yeah, I do. They come popping up every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you looking, or are you being looked for? The way they talk about that ayahuasca? I think some of them say things like that. Ayahuasca will come looking for you.
Yeah, I've heard that.
I like the idea of those sorts of things. They're kind of lovely, that they come looking for you.
Yeah, they kind of call you, right?
Yeah. Geez, we have hit the 2 hours, dude. So I'll put the link to your book, MDMA, and so Your Neighbors Are Doing Psychedelics, MDMA, and then
is the title. Yeah,
the title. And when do you think your next one's going to be?
It could be as early as the summer.
Okay.
I'm doing another deep dive into writing, probably like mid-month. So I would figure this summer it could be available.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm I self-published the first book. I actually had a wonderful thing happen. An Italian publisher wants to publish that first book on MDMA in Italian.
Oh, wow,
So
that's lovely.
yeah, that'll be out late next year. So yeah, deep dive this next couple months, and I'm hoping I can have that 5-MeO ready for another self-publish, be available on Amazon, or I will more than likely send the manuscript out to, you know, the big 10 publishers and see if somebody bites. I mean, it's like, I'm set up perfectly as far as timing with just all the conversation around it. Yeah, so by the time people see this, I'm not positive where the book will be, but I'm moving towards getting it out.
Yeah, like I mean, we gave ours free. We gave it away for 2 weeks, and it got 200,000 views in 2 weeks.
Man, that's amazing.
It is, yeah. From like, we got word of mouth, but we didn't spend any money. We just put it out there, and obviously the algorithm. So the timing is interesting. It would be nice to make some money, you know, yourself, but that didn't happen. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see the timing of your book then, to see if anything catches. I'm more interested to see what happens with you.
yeah. I'll keep the.
Yeah, maybe that's another one. Maybe that's a podcast in and of itself. If we might capture some of that,
yeah, it might be. I wanted to offer to anybody that's listening on this, if you go through my website and there's a place to contact me, if you hit me up via email and just say in the subject line, Frank sent me or something like that, I'll send you a free copy of the MDMA book. So
that's very good.
Yeah, just to kind of see.
I think they should. Yeah, go on. What we going to see?
I just want to see, you know, like I've sold some copies, people are interested, but I'd love to get it out there. I'd love to really have Nick's story be useful for people. And it's also, you know, I saw what you did with putting your movie out for free. And it's like, for a long time, I've been thinking that's a smart way to go to get people to see it, you know? So I'm hoping
that's a lovely offer. I think, and if you can get reviews, I should really I put this at the start, maybe. It's the reviews on Amazon, I think, is what would be great. People write reviews.
I got some reviews. They're trickling in.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Could always use more.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing. Self-publishing is a difficult thing. I think I did it a few years back, and it's a challenge. But yours is very topical and real, like, so mine was fiction. But you know, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about that.
It is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Well, Frank, thanks for having me on, and
thank you, dude. And you enjoy. I was looking forward to talk to you. It was just the way it worked out, fucking life and all that. You know.